Do you think you could survive a medieval blizzard? Most people imagine winter in the Middle Ages the way movies and television portray it. A warm hearth glowing inside a stone cottage, thick cloaks wrapped around broad shoulders, and bright torchlight cutting through the darkness. But real winter storms of that era were nothing like the stories. Chronicles describe them as walls of white that swallowed roads, silenced forests, and reshaped entire valleys in a single night. These storms were powerful enough to freeze animals where they stood and lock whole villages under snow until spring. Against that kind of cold, comfort disappeared, and survival depended on knowledge, speed, and the willingness to use every resource available. One such storm struck the northern woods centuries ago, and at the center of it was Aldrich, an ordinary woodsman making his way home before the sky closed in. He had no castle walls, no modern insulated jacket, no advanced gear, only a few tools, a wool cloak, basic provisions, and the experience passed down through generations of medieval survivors. When the first icy gusts swept across the forest, carrying needles of frozen snow, Aldrich knew he was in trouble. By the time he reached the first bend in the trail, the path behind him was already buried. The storm had arrived early, faster and more violently than expected, turning the familiar forest into a maze of whirling white. The temperature fell so sharply that even the breath from Aldrich's horse froze against its mane. Birds vanished. The forest grew unnaturally quiet. Medieval people understood these signs well. They meant a great storm was forming, the kind that made even experienced travelers turn back immediately. But Aldrich had no way to return. The trail was gone, the wind was rising, and visibility had dropped to a few steps at best. With only a handful of hours before the blizzard reached full force, he had to make a decision that could determine whether he would see the next sunrise. Find shelter, build heat, and create a system strong enough to withstand the cold that was coming. He guided his horse toward a ridge where the land dipped into a shallow slope. The wind was less aggressive here, blocked by ancient pines standing like dark pillars against the sky. When the gusts quieted for a moment, Aldrich spotted a natural rise in the earth, the kind of slope that could serve as a shield. Medieval woodsmen knew instincts like these well. The earth itself was one of the best protectors against wind and freezing air. Without hesitating, Aldrich began to dig. His hands, a small shovel, and even the flat side of his axe worked together as he carved a hollow into the ground, forming a pocket large enough for his body, a small fire pit, and any supplies he could keep dry. Soil held warmth far better than open air, and even a thin earthen wall could mean the difference between shivering all night or holding on to precious degrees of heat. As the hollow took shape, Aldrich built a roof from branches, layering them tightly and packing snow on top. Snow, counterintuitively, acts as an insulator when compacted. Medieval hunters knew it could trap warmth inside small shelters. Aldrich's entrance faced away from the storm's direction, allowing the dugout to breathe without letting the wind tear inside. The storm roared louder behind him, but inside this small space, a fragile calm began to form. Still, a shelter alone would never be enough. Aldrich needed heat, a steady source that would warm the tight air inside without choking him with smoke. From his pack, he pulled a battered iron pot, dented from years of use. Medieval families often used portable braziers, metal containers designed to hold glowing coals, and Aldrich improvised his own. He built a quick fire outside, letting the driest pieces of hardwood burn down until they became hot, glowing embers. These he carefully transferred into the pot and carried into the dugout, placing the makeshift brazier on a flat stone so it wouldn't scorch roots or soil. Hardwood coals burned slowly with little smoke, a trick medieval people relied on for heating closed spaces. Within moments, a soft warmth spread through the shelter, a contrast to the sharp cold clawing at the world outside. It wasn't much, but it was enough to take the edge off the freezing air. Aldrich knew he would need more, though. Nights during a blizzard were long, and fires left unattended could smother themselves quickly. When the wind softened briefly, he stepped back outside to gather several smooth stones. Medieval people used these as night warmers, heating them by the fire and wrapping them in cloth to radiate heat for hours. Aldrich chose only stones without cracks. Any flaw could cause a stone to burst when heated. Once they were hot enough to sizzle in the snow, he wrapped them in wool and placed them near the spot where he would sleep. The stored heat seeped slowly through the fabric, warming the space around him like primitive batteries. Inside the dugout, Aldrich began layering the walls with the materials he carried: spare cloth, old wool pieces, and a pair of animal hides used for trading. Medieval castles lined their stone walls with tapestries to retain heat, and Aldrich used the same principle here. Each layer of fabric created small air pockets that trapped warmth and reduced drafts. The transformation was immediate. The earthen walls no longer felt like icy slabs, but began to hold the warmth collecting inside. He then spread hay and pine branches across the floor, knowing cold ground could steal body heat faster than cold air. Medieval households often scattered straw across stone floors for this exact reason. On top of this, he laid his furs, creating a bed that lifted him away from the chill of the soil and closer to the protective warmth of the hot stones. As he worked, the storm intensified. Snow hammered the roof in heavy bursts, and the dog he had found, small, trembling, and half-tucked beneath a fallen log, now lay curled beside the warm stones, gradually recovering. Medieval people often relied on animals as sources of warmth. Dogs, goats, even chickens were sometimes sheltered indoors during winter because their body heat made a real difference. Aldrich hadn't planned on a companion, but now he was grateful for the small heartbeat beside him. The blizzard was growing stronger, but so was the system Aldrich built. The cold pressed harder against the shelter as night approached, and Aldrich understood that even with fire, cloth, and furs, his greatest tool for survival was still his own body. Medieval healers often wrote that warmth is born from moving blood, and although their science was limited, their observation was right. Sitting still for too long would invite the cold to settle into his limbs and pull him into exhaustion. So, Aldrich created a routine, a rhythm he repeated throughout the night. Every hour he stretched his shoulders, rolled his wrists, and paced the small dugout, careful not to disturb. The dog curled beside the furs. Even simple tasks, shaking out blankets, adjusting stones, tidying the entrance, kept his body active and his mind alert. When his stomach rumbled, he set to work preparing the kind of food medieval families relied on during harsh winters. Something hot, thick, and rich in fat. He added dried barley, scraps of smoked meat, and a small piece of tallow into his pot, letting it simmer above the coals. Fat burns slowly in the body, releasing warmth gradually through the bloodstream. Even a single bowl of such stew could strengthen a person for hours. And the moment Aldrich ate, he felt the difference. Warmth spread from his chest outward, steady and calming, pushing back against the cold creeping at the edges of the shelter. He kept the pot simmering afterward, filling it with melted snow and a handful of dried herbs. Medieval households used warm drinks not for luxury, but for survival, and Aldrich did the same. Each sip maintained heat in his core and lifted his spirits. Before resting, he performed a simple ritual. Drink, adjust the coals, reposition the hot stones, check the ceiling, and wrap himself beneath the furs with the dog nestled close. These small rituals brought order to the storm's chaos, allowing him to stay focused instead of overwhelmed. But outside, the blizzard was gathering its full strength. By midnight, it felt as if the entire world had become a single force, pushing against the little dugout. The wind roared, not in gusts, but in sustained waves that rattled the earth overhead. Branches cracked and fell in the darkness, swallowed instantly by the storm's howl. Snow pounded the roof with such weight that small showers of soil fell from above, sprinkling across Aldrich's bedding like dust from an old ceiling. The temperature dropped again, sharper this time, and the brazier flickered, its glow shrinking as cold air seeped through invisible cracks. The dog lifted its head, ears pricking toward the entrance. Animals often sense danger faster than humans, and Aldrich knew the warning was real. When the ceiling sagged slightly under a new burden of snow, he acted at once. Crawling to the entrance, he pushed his shoulder hard against the packed drift that had begun sealing the shelter shut. The wind struck him immediately, a slicing cold that felt like it could peel the warmth from his bones. But he pushed through it. Snow broke loose in chunks, rolling away into the dark, and fresh air moved into the dugout once again. That breath of circulation might have been invisible, but it was critical. Without it, the fire could suffocate, and he could suffocate with it. He scrambled back inside and fed the fire pit with a few precious sticks of dry wood. Flames rose gently, lighting the small space with a warm flicker. He tightened the fabric lining the walls, pressed the hot stones closer to the bed, and pulled the dog under the furs again. The shelter held. The system he built, earth, fire, fabric, movement, food, held. Every piece mattered. Without any one of them, the storm would have found a weakness. The blizzard continued through the deepest hours of the night, testing every seam of the dugout. Sometimes the wind grew so loud it vibrated in Aldrich's chest. Other times it dulled into a steady hum, like distant thunder muffled by snow. Through it all, Aldrich stayed alert, waking every hour to check his fire, adjust the stones, or simply sit up and move his limbs. He refused to let the cold settle inside him. When the first hint of light finally appeared, a faint gray glow seeping through the storm clouds, it felt unreal. Aldrich pushed open the entrance again, and this time, the snow gave way more easily. Outside, the forest looked transformed into another world. Drifts rose taller than a man, trees leaned under heavy blankets of ice, and the path he had traveled yesterday was gone without a trace. Yet he was still alive. Survival in a medieval blizzard was never about strength alone. It was about understanding heat, how to make it, how to keep it, how to share it. Aldrich survived because he built a complete system: shelter from earth, warmth from fire, insulation from fabric and furs, steady heat from stones, internal fuel from food, a heartbeat of warmth from an animal, and a constant rhythm of movement to keep his blood alive. Each part worked with the others, creating a fragile but effective shield against the cold. Modern technology has made winter feel tame, but the principles that saved Aldrich remain the same. Heat must be created, heat must be preserved, and heat must be distributed wisely. In emergencies, even today, these medieval lessons still matter. Warm clothing layered properly can outperform a single thick coat. A small insulated shelter can hold more heat than a large unprotected space. Hot food, warm drinks, physical movement, and shared body heat all remain vital tools for survival. Aldrich's story closes with a simple truth. He lived because he respected the storm, not because he fought it blindly. He adapted quickly, used what he had, and trusted knowledge passed down through centuries. The question now returns to you. With the same tools, the same challenges, and the same storm pressing toward you from the white horizon, could you survive a medieval blizzard?